Слава Україні!
Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I do hope that everyone's having a fantastic day, and I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There is a ton of stuff happening on throughout the news today, whether you're talking about what's happening in Europe, what's happening in the Middle East, Africa, North America, or wherever you have an interest in the subject. There is a ton of stuff that is happening, and there is a ton of stuff that is happening which is not to say is good. It's a lot of stuff that's causing a lot of human suffering throughout the world. So whether you're talking about the war in Ukraine, you're talking about the immediate need for disaster relief there in Turkey and northern Syria, or whether you're talking about what's happening, the ongoing efforts there in places such as the Horn of Africa, Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, or elsewhere throughout the world, there's always someone who is in need. And if you would like to have the opportunity to give back, that is what we are here to do, is to inform you as the viewer here at the New News as to what's happening in the world around you, where it's happening, to keep you updated, and then also provide the opportunity to give back to help these people that are affected by the very same news stories we talk about here every single night. And so please be sure and check out that video description below. 70% or more of all the donations that the organizations in that description do receive do go directly to their programs, meaning that they go to helping people, with 30% or less going to things such as salaries and administration's costs. And so please, I implore you to check out all of those wonderful organizations in the description. We've taken a lot of time to vet them, and many of them have actually been submitted by you guys as the viewers. So please continue to submit those. We were constantly wanting to improve that list and continue to add to that list, especially for areas that are relatively hard to reach. So please be sure to get onto the Discord or onto our website and get in touch with a staff member if you have an organization. Send us their link as well as a short description of what they do, and we'll get the vetting process started. In the meantime, if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, and that's okay too. One of the biggest things you can do is help us grow this channel and grow our impact. The more people that come here and watch the news, the more people that are going to be here that can donate, that are able to give to these organizations, and the more good we can have on people's lives throughout the world overall. And we want to get to the point where we can actually put fundraisers directly onto this stream. And when that happens, every single stream that we do will have a fundraiser attached to it. There will be no super chats. There will be no monetizing for any kind of profits or anything. 100% of everything we do here at the New News will always be non-profit. It will always go to charity. And as we move on here into the news, I see a lot of people already talking here in the live chat. Always happy to see everyone here, and welcome back to everyone. Max, Tim, Aravis, Rob, always happy to see everybody. And if you are in the live chat, please be sure to check out and ask questions throughout the stream as you're going through here. I am watching live chat, obviously, as we go through the stream tonight, and I will answer questions to the very best of my ability. Now, if you may be new here and wondering what my expertise are, I can certainly answer that for you. To give you a little bit about myself, I served in the Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020, and I served as an O-352 anti-tank missileman and a corporal with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines out of 29 Palms, California. I did 2 tours to the Middle East. My first tour between October of 2017 and March of 2018. I served in the country of Syria for about 4.5 months, with a month and a half in transit in Kuwait. During that time, I was directly attached to Special Operations Forces, Green Berets, U.S. Army Rangers, as well as Navy SEALs, the SAS and Royal Marines there, as well as other coalition partners inside of Syria as part of Operation Inherent Resolve in the fight against the Islamic State. During my time there, I spent significant amounts of time with the Syrian Democratic Forces and assisting in also stabilization efforts in the northeastern part of Syria, in and around Deir ez-Zor and Al-Hasaka provinces. During my, I came back to the United States in March of 2018, and from there on, I actually ran an armory as my second billet, my second job, if you will, inside of the Marine Corps for about 2.5 years. During that time, I was the non-commissioned officer in charge of the Weapons Company Armory, and maintained all of the international logistics and maintenance required during the duration of that. My second tour to the Middle East was between October of 2019 and March of 2020. During that time, I was the Javelin team leader attached to the Crisis Response Company out of Kuwait. During that time, I went to the Baghdad Embassy complex on New Year's of 2020 as one of the 100 Marines that responded to the embassy being attacked. There, we provided security and resecured the embassy from 4,000 protesters and Katiba's Bullah militants. From there, after about a month and a half at the actual embassy and overseeing all of the anti-armor operations there, I went to Saudi Arabia and trained Saudi Arabian Marines alongside a SEAL team. They're in Saudi Arabia preparing to deploy to Yemen. And so I am a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armored doctrine. I'm also a fully cross-trained machine gunner, a fully cross-trained rifleman, a partially cross-trained radio operator, and a CLS, or Combat Lifesaver Certified Marine, meaning I have received additional medical training on top of what most Marines do receive in order to be able to provide additional medical assistance and assist Navy corpsmen in their duties. And I do have real-world experience treating trauma patients with my skills in that. Outside of that, I do have interest in other things: science, history, geopolitics, the works, human geography, but I am not an expert in any of them. And it really doesn't matter, though, if I'm an expert in something or not, because I always implore that you as the viewer, please do your own research. There is no substitute for research when it comes to any of these topics. You could research many of these things for a lifetime and still not have the full understanding of them, but we will do our best here as we can. So please be sure to do your own research. If you want a starting point, always go through and you can always go through and check out these maps. These ones are posted every single night before the stream, so you can follow along if you would like, or you can go back through there. There's always usually associated articles and documentation that goes with these that we may not show on stream, partially because of copyright and partially because we also want to go through a lot of the stuff that we've done ourselves before finding those other articles to verify. And so please be sure to check out those maps and to check out if you would like a starting point or you just want to follow along. And with that, we get ready to roll immediately here into the news. And we immediately start off with, of course, the special report there in Ukraine. And a special report it certainly is. We're coming down here into Kyiv, where we have 3 stories coming out tonight. People are talking about how I can't count past 30. That is true. 30-round magazines, everybody, for those that don't get that joke. And you don't have to worry about 30-round, or you don't have to worry about counting past 30s for a machine gun, because you count it in bursts, not in rounds. But as we go through here, a very small but powerful statement was made by the Ukrainians. As everyone knows, at this point, or if in case you don't, there is several very massive and very devastating earthquakes which hit Turkey and northern Syria. A lot of people aren't really focused on northern Syria. They were equally hit. But what we can say, or what we can see here, is that Ukraine is obviously in the midst of this huge war. And it's caused an immense amount of death and destruction and damage. And it's unimaginable just the efforts it takes to just deal with what's happening in their own country. And at this point, as we'll get to here later in the international news, what's happened in Turkey is utterly devastating as well. I mean, it's indescribable, really, the level of devastation that we're seeing inside of Turkey and Syria because of this earthquake. And despite everything that Ukraine is going through and its own needs, Ukraine is and has sent first responders to assist with the search and rescue efforts. They can't really send a whole lot of supplies or really a whole lot of personnel, but they aren't really required to. They have very much bigger problems they're dealing with right now, and they are still doing it. It already goes above and beyond what was expected, which is just words of condolence. And Turkey has been a very key ally. Despite a lot of controversies, Turkey has been a very key ally. We see Ukrainian troops running around in MRAP Kirpis and the YPRs. We see them having used the TB2 Bayraktar drone, which has been absolutely a game changer, especially when you're looking at earlier in the war. And that was some of the very first really major assistance that they were getting, aside from Javelin and in-law anti-tank missiles. And so, despite its own desperate needs, they have deployed a team with equipment. From President Zelensky himself, and then coming from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Ministry of Internal Affairs are the ones who run all of the search and rescue operations, both domestically and internationally. especially when you consider everything that this country has gone through and that Turkey has gone through simultaneously now. But when you think about just how much response has gone to Ukraine, and understanding that how much has been done for Ukraine and how much aid has come in and how much the world completely shifted their priorities, to assist Ukraine, and then didn't need to, could definitely use the personnel in their own country, still dealing with a war, expects it to get worse here very shortly, with an anticipated offensive by the Russians, and still they could have just left it, as many have, at condolences over the loss of life and destruction, but instead, regardless of the politics or anything, just said, we're sending a team, and did so. So a very small, it's not a large team, but it's very small, but it's a very powerful statement nonetheless. As we move on here, we get to the unfortunate and solemn duty of reporting the child casualty update. Quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 461 Ukrainian children have died, 920 children have been injured. Most victims among children are from the Donetsk region. That does come from the Prosecutor General's office here in Ukraine. We can also take a look at that. That quote came out today. This is the graphic that came out yesterday. So this graphic is showing 919 injured children, just to make that clear there for you. And it goes over several other things, including 68,321 war crimes and crimes of aggression, 16,825 crimes against national security, 637 so far identified suspects, and of course the child casualty update that comes along with it. This does not include children which have been unlawfully deported, forcefully deported by the Russians. This does not include missing children. And it also doesn't take into account how many children thus far are still in areas of active and continuous combat, where those numbers simply cannot be easily or verifiably reported with any kind of accreditation. But while we are talking about child casualty updates, the Ministry of Internal Affairs is working very hard to prevent child casualties in areas that have been so far cleared out of actual Russian forces, because unfortunately what you see in many parts of Ukraine that have for the better part of a year at this point, coming up 8, 9, 10 months, have not had Russian forces in them, but still have massive amounts of unexploded ordnance and booby traps. And one of the things that children, and really the world, because I am also in this cult, is the cult of Patron. Patron is a bomb-sniffing dog. I believe he's a terrier, and he is this tiny little dog, but very, very well known. He first came to notoriety because he went to places around Kyiv and Chernihiv, and he found over 2,000 unexploded munitions. Just that dog. Patron, very adorable little dog. Always have enjoyed seeing the posts by him. But he has his own show now. And it's a little cartoon show. And it is adorable in its own right. It's very much for young kids, though, because young kids very much are, attached to this. It's something that they can reach out and see and listen to and are engaged by, and have been for a long time. So this is the whole point of this show, is to teach, as they have been using Patron now, is to be teaching the dangers of unexploded ordnance and booby traps to prevent especially child casualties. Children don't fully understand or appreciate the dangers. Adults, in a lot of cases, don't fully understand or appreciate the danger of unexploded ordnance, let alone children. And so they're trying to there's been a very massive effort by the sappers and by the EOD teams and engineers inside of Ukraine to make apps to identify and locate and give warnings for unexploded ordnance and to teach children about the dangers in the population. So pretty awesome. There is a link on here. We won't click it, but there's a link here to to that official YouTube channel, and so that way you can watch that second episode. First episode was adorable. Once again, just for warning, it is very much it's for young children. So, but it does come in Polish and English subtitles, by the way. As we move on here and over into Kharkiv, it may be for young children, but he's still adorable. Unfortunately, it would appear that more Russian missiles did strike the city of Kharkiv. Not a lot of information onto the level of damage or casualties or what have you, but explosions were reported in the city of Kharkiv after reported launches were seen coming from Belgorod, which is just across the border inside of Russia. This has been something that we've seen for a very long time. We've seen Kharkiv being struck with S-300 missiles, Iskander-M missiles, Caliber cruise missiles for pretty much the duration of the war, especially after basic, standard BM-21 Graz, the tornado systems, could no longer actually reach the city of Kharkiv itself. And so they started using these longer range, heavier munitions. And they continue to do this. There's been a minor reprieve in several of them between these launches. Some question if this is because they're holding back and trying to lessen their expenditures before a large expensive to conserve a large offensive by the Russians to conserve ammunition, and others are suggesting it's just due to depletion of military stockpiles and the inability to produce large quantities of replacements, and so they're burning through ammo faster doing these strikes than they can physically replace in any meaningful way to continue the war. And so it's a question as to which one that is, or if it's a little bit of both. But regardless, we are seeing at least some launches. These are suspected to be S-300 missiles, which are intended to hit surface. It's a surface-to-air missile system, but many of them have been converted to hit ground targets in order to keep Caliber missiles, Caliber cruise missiles, and the Iskander and ballistic missiles in reserve. So that's coming from Kharkiv. This is from Belgorod.
Yeah. Ой. Ух ты ж.
So those are the Iskander-M missile, or the missiles, period. We can't identify them, obviously, but the missiles being fired reportedly from Belgorod. Speaking of a large-scale offensive, maybe not the anticipated one that we've been or that many people are getting worried about, but definitely on a counteroffensive nonetheless. The Russian forces are currently assaulting through the Ukrainian line, or attempting to, here in the Luhansk Oblast, reportedly around the area of Crimea. And this, so far, is what we can suggest is being not completely confirmed or identified, but it is suspected and pretty good reason to believe it is the VDV 331st Guards Regiment of the 98th Guards Division of the VDV, which are Russian paratroopers. And this is coming from Syria Haida, who is talking about this offensive. He says, in Crimea direction, maximum escalation. Occupiers are trying to break through our defensive line. Hashtag Luhansk Oblast. And he is in charge of the Luhansk Oblast. And we do see here a video coming out of these troops reportedly in the Luhansk Oblast. The terrain, as well as the terrain features we can see here, as well as the current climate conditions there, definitely indicate it's in the eastern sector, especially in the Luhansk Oblast. We know there's been relatively heavy snowfall, but VDV paratroopers, very easily identifiable, especially by their parade ribbons that they are usually wearing on their uniforms. These guys obviously aren't wearing those parade jackets that we see, but the parade helmets. And also by the BMD series vehicles, which are specifically meant for paratroopers. The reason for these vehicles, essentially they're BMPs, but they're smaller and lighter, and they carry similar armaments and similar in the same kind of series of how they're made. But the BMPs, these tracks actually, their suspension, this entire suspension system collapses, so that way it can actually lower itself and be moved inside of an aircraft to theoretically be paradropped, but more than likely flown into a recently taken airfield, and then now paratroopers have mechanized support. This is what I'm talking about when paratroopers are mechanized just like the rest of the Russian army, to an over-reliance on mechanization. And you can see his VDV patch right there. This one, this I believe is designated him as part of the Air Assault Corps. So very distinguishable. The VDV definitely are very much distinguishable from the standard ground troops, but they're considered to be some of the better troops that the Russians have ever used. We think that part of the reason that the Russians, part of the reason that the VDV has been essentially entirely almost annihilated, essentially, is because they're being used in a role that they weren't originally intended to be used. The very beginning of the war was very devastating to the VDV, and being a higher echelon force than your standard conscripted ground forces of the Russian Federation, these guys were getting more training, better equipment, and they are kind of a cut above the rest. At least that's the mentality that Russia puts forth and what they're supposed to be. And I would say that at the beginning of the war, that's likely very true, especially when you're looking at that very deep assault on Hostomel Airfield. But that was a very much a tactical mistake and a strategic mistake there in the beginning of the war, is using that deep of a unassisted, unsupported air assault that deep into enemy held territory, and obviously that was met with very devastating losses. But that made up a very, these kinds of attacks, these deep air assaults. We also saw it happen around the Kyiv Zoo as well, and many other locations. Always did not end up in their favor, and suffered either complete wipeout of their forces or at least very significant casualties. And the war of attrition does not do very well for paratroopers, which are considered to be a relatively fragile unit when unsupported, and that's what we kind of see there. So very interesting to see the VDV kind of being used again. I haven't seen them in a long time. Let's see here. Tim F says, I've heard Iron Dome has been green light, but that may have just been a statement. I've heard a lot of things about that, but the reality is it feasible? And that's kind of the question. The Iron Dome defense system is great for Israel, but it's not necessarily great for everywhere else in the world. Now, any air defense improvements are very highly welcome. So I'm not saying that they shouldn't get it regardless of, if it loses effectiveness, because they should. They need the air defense. It would save a lot of people's lives, and it's just a great thing to have. But the thing is that Israel has a lot less area to defend against, and has a lot better ability to saturate, and it's very hard to oversaturate the airspace with rockets and missiles and mortars. So it's a lot easier for the Iron Dome defense system to be much more effective. And so it kind of skews the effectiveness of that because of the situation it finds itself being used, which is exactly the reason it was built, is to literally create an Iron Dome around Israel, which is constantly being shelled by somebody somewhere because everyone around them hates them, including some people that happen to live in the territory designated as Israel, that are groups that are, pro-Palestinian groups, Palestinian nationalist groups. So definitely wouldn't see the same results in Ukraine, just so much bigger in scale. But I think it'd be good nonetheless. Book and 40, the Bradleys are in Poland now. They're coming. I think that Ukraine is going to wait until spring to launch a counteroffensive. By then, Bradleys, Mortars, and AMX-10s will be available. Behind that comes Strikers, CV-90s, and Leopards. Well, I can agree, but I think it's actually going to be up until... I think all of that will be available by the time they launch the counteroffensive. If you look at it, and I was actually just talking with my buddy, of course, Rob. Rob, always happy to see you here, man. I was talking to Rob earlier, and it's something that we've kind of looked at before. We had a point that was called standardization. This was about a couple weeks ago, where there was some photos of a newly formed brigade called the 47th Assault Brigade. And they are rocking M16A4s with Trigicon RCOs, probably the M4 and A4 variants, which are the chevron in them. But they're also rocking 203s, the M203 40mm underbarrel grenade launcher. Basically, they're rocking the Laws, they're rocking the AT4s, they're rocking the Javs, they're rocking the In-Laws, and they're rocking the 240s. The 240 Bravos, or the GPMG if you're from the United Kingdom. And so what this tells us is this is one of several assault brigades that is being constituted and formed that has yet to be used in combat. We haven't seen them in combat. We haven't seen them, really engaging anything. In any major location, Bakhmut, Soledar, any of these locations seeing very heavy fighting, these guys haven't been dedicated to. And that also happens to be the same assault brigade that we see training on the Bradleys, that inside of areas like Poland. So this tells us that either these are Ukrainian troops that are now being re-outfitted with NATO equipment, or these are the troops that went to the United Kingdom or one of the other allied countries and trained under NATO instructors and have been constituted into a single fighting unit with similar tactics. The Ukrainians did just announce that they had Ukrainian officers go to other places such as Poland and undergo strategic and tactical training in a NATO setting. So that way their officers that will become in charge of these NATO trained troops also have received NATO training and can think and have war gamed with NATO officers on how to operate in certain scenarios, such as a possible counteroffensive. And we see that they're using NATO equipment and that they're going to be getting NATO vehicles, which they are also training on. So you're essentially looking at what Ukraine is using on the front lines right now is exactly how it has been throughout the entire war, mostly comprised of Soviet-era equipment. T-Series tanks, T-Series tanks, BMPs, BMDs, Tigers, the Gaz cars, the ZIL trucks. That's what you're looking at on the front lines right now. You're running mostly AKs. Whether that be the AKM, the AK-47, the AK-74. Doesn't matter. They're running AK series equipment, and it's guys that are battle hardened. They've been on the front lines for a long time, and they've been rotated on and off the front. But other than that, these guys have been engaged in this war this entire time. They haven't had the time to be going and doing NATO style training. They just did whatever training they need to do to learn how to shoot the javelin, and so that way they can go kill the tank that's about a mile the other way. That's kind of the whole ideology I think we're seeing here. We're seeing the transition, the fresh troops that will be dedicated to the offensive will be essentially Ukraine's version of NATO forces. NATO trained officers, NATO trained troops, NATO equipment, NATO vehicles, and they know how to use them all, down to the tanks, the armored personnel carriers, and their weapons and rifles and ammunition. And that, I think, is going to be a very, very different warfare type that we see from what we're seeing now, because of that training and because of that doctrine and because of that equipment. I think that counteroffensive is going to be very different in tone, because it's going to pit the things that NATO has been preparing for up against what the Russians have been preparing for the last, in some cases, everyone's lives. Which is a very, very important. I think it's going to be a very different thing, and that's kind of what we're seeing. I think that's when these assault battalions are ready, that's when that counteroffensive is going to happen. Those Leopards, the Challengers, the Abrams, everything is expected to arrive in Ukraine and be ready to be used by March. This is the end of the Rasputitsa season, which is when they're going to be able to launch a counteroffensive, and that's when these battalions, these assault regiments and everything will be able to be used and be effective. And that's my personal opinion. Everyone can have, that's at least what I'm seeing here. So what we see here, as we move down here into the Donetsk Oblast, we see this is the latest daily Donetsk update. This is coming from Pavel Kolenko, who's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. And he says, quote, on February 7th, number of victims of Russian army in Donetsk Oblast increased by 2 injured. And this came out at 8 a.m. local time this morning. And as you can see here, both of the injured ended up coming from Bakhmut itself, which is still under very significant fighting. So far, since February the 24th of last year, 1,352 civilians have been killed, with an additional 3,002 having been injured. And this does not include areas such as Volnovakha, such as the city of Donetsk itself, such as Makivka or Horlivka, or, of course, the city of Mariupol, where, by Maxar satellite photo analysis alone, tens of thousands of Ukrainian civilians are expected to have been killed. Just south of the city of Kramatorsk, which is currently serving as the de facto head of government for Ukrainian-controlled territory, we see here is Druzhkivka, where we see that, once again, they were shelled. Now, the shelling ended up hitting local residential buildings, landing all around it, and unfortunately also landing in a bunch of apartment complexes. Also appears to have one of those rounds appears to have landed in front of the local church. Once again, Pavel Kolenko, whose office is presenting these photos once again today. But also from the Ukrainian Red Cross, who are also there present on the ground. Said for a second day in a row, the Ukrainian Red Cross is on duty at the site of liquidation of the consequences of rocket attacks in Druzhkivka, Donetsk region. As a result of the attack, 15 high-rise buildings were damaged, one of which was destroyed by almost 90. The city of Bakhmut is still under very fierce and heavy fighting, despite the setbacks that have been ongoing for the Ukrainians along their northern flank. Ukrainian forces continue to hold the city against assault after assault after assault by Russian forces on the outskirts of town. They're up against a numerically superior force, at least by what we have seen there on the ground, but they continue to hold nonetheless and hold firm that they do. Now, there have been unsubstantiated reports and claims that the Wagner Group is no longer the Russian units that are spearheading this effort. In fact, it is believed that Russian regulars have indeed taken the spearhead and are now in charge of the operation around Bakhmut, which is now being overseen by the actual Russian army and not by a private military corporation. This could be for several different reasons. Partially, it could be believed that it's because of the massive amounts of casualties that have essentially annihilated the Wagner Group, or it could also be because of Prigozhin, who has been slowly falling out of favor with a lot of the inner circle with Putin. In some cases, coming at direct odds with him. This means that regular Ukrainian troops may be up against the regular Russian army once again, which may be better equipped and supported than their Wagner counterparts. It's unknown if these troops will fare any better, though, for the Russians, because the tactics have yet to see a change. So they could just be that they're going to do the same thing the Wagner Group did with equally devastating results. Fortunately, a lot of these videos do have copyright music, but you can see there heavy machine gun fire on, obviously entering into a wood line, looking like Russian positions over there.
На зв'язку.
Ми зараз з кулемета попрацюємо по всім підозрілим вікнам.
Навіть не питай мене, я тільки за.
Щоб хлопці, які двигаються, не лякались. Ми починаємо.
Все, так, всі дома, всі дома.
Все, плюс, давай. Так.
На зв'язку.
Booking 4, he says, saw a report that convicts are not volunteer for Wagner, 80% death rate. Yeah, well, the Wagner group is, he was pretty upfront about it. Prigozhin was pretty upfront about it when he went to that prison of, yeah, you're probably not going to live through this, but if you do, you'll be a hero and your entire, like, record will be wiped. And we've seen some guys that got wounded and served 6 months with the Wagner group and have been released. So, I mean, he wasn't lying about any of it. He was very forthcoming, believe it or not, with the convicts. But if you're a convict, your choice is possibly freedom and heroism, or I sit in a prison for God knows how long because they're just going to continue to extend my sentence and I'm going to rot in a gulag. So, Russian prison, possibly killed in Ukraine, possibly not killed in Ukraine. He doesn't exactly give them a very good choice. So, I mean, that's up for you to decide. But, yeah, I guess you kind of have to put yourself in their shoes as to, well, what am I going to do? And as for that guy, I've never been a fan of the PKM, but little known fact, but something my seniors always told me. The thing is that as a machine gunner, your life expectancy on the battlefield, once you begin engaging, is 7 seconds. Which is why they all have A gunners and why there's something called the dead gunner drill. Because once you start opening up with a machine gun, you are now the most dangerous thing and therefore the biggest target on a battlefield. Which is why, as an anti-tank missileman, your life expectancy is 8 seconds. Because that extra second is because the machine gun shoots before you do.
Кружит, вертится над нами, парит под облаками. Кружит, вертится над нами, достать его руками. Кружит, вертится над нами, парит под облаками. Кружит, вертится над нами.
This gives a really good example as to why you don't stand behind. I have no idea why his friend is standing behind him filming like this. Because I want you to look at this. So look at this doghouse when he fires this. This is just an RPG-7. So this isn't a tow missile or a Moz or aka the M3 Carl Gustav. This isn't an AT-4. This is just an RPG-7. And watch what happens to this doghouse with that backblast, that overpressure coming from the back end of the rocket. That is why you clear your backblast, because that is nothing but hot gases that are being quickly expelled from the back end of the rocket or missile as it's going out. And if you're within X amount of distance, those will seriously injure, if not kill you. It's just like being killed by overpressure. It is extremely horrific, and this is why, if you've ever seen other channels, it's, the guy goes, oh crap, when his buddy runs behind him and he shoots the RPG and the backblast hits him in the face. That guy is dead. I mean, if he's not, he's definitely dying. It's a horrific way to go. And a lot of those heavier anti-tank guided missiles, like the TOW missile, are going to have much heavier. But you can see just the power as it blows off the entire roof there. A really good illustration of backblast that most people don't get to see. We can see here, just armored crews here in the city of Bakhmut. I think that would happen to be the same one.
Готов, блядь. Вы готовы? Отделение летим, ебать. Стой. Попали?
You can see just how close this engagement is. I mean, that's not a very far distance. See some of the Ukrainian armored forces operating here. Reportedly the Ukrainian 4th Tank Brigade. This is supposedly the only safe route for Ukrainian forces into the city of Bakhmut.
Выстрел, блядь.
Another RPG gunner here.
Смотри! О! Сука, попал, блядь! Я, блядь, только что 5 подряд уебал туда. 300 и по центру. Да. Все, лети. Чуть-чуть, блин. Не. Стой, стой. Вон он. Давай.
See a lot of relatively close range RPG shots against what it seems like infantry targets. So I'd hate to be the guy I hate to be the guy that's on the receiving end of the Ukrainians who are rapid firing RPGs at you. We come down here to the south to the city of New York. This is also in the Donetsk region. Artillery strikes ended up hitting an apartment building. The Russian artillery ended up striking the 9th floor of the building there, and it ended up breaching the outer wall and collapsing the staircase, preventing evacuation along that route. So far, no casualties were reported. You can see sections of the wall, and you can actually see parts of that staircase as it has collapsed there. Book and Forty says, take a lesson from World War II. Russians used 152 millimeter assault guns. The U.S. had 105 Shermans, and the Germans had Bombars, all for urban combat. Big HE shells can make a big difference. Yeah, except that we don't fight wars like that anymore. There's a lot better ways to do urban combat now. So, a large blaze there in Makivka. A large blaze lit up the night sky over Makivka. This usually signifies a foolish accident or a strike on a Russian logistical installations. The intensity of the blaze suggests a fuel or oil depot, as there's no sympathetic detonations, which means other detonations, cook-offs of the ammunition. Makivka, near the city of Donetsk itself, is known to serve as a major hub for Russian logistical efforts in this sector of the front lines. It is reportedly a HIMARS strike. I've been seeing more and more tonight about it.
Что-то горит.
Червоногвардейский район. Ближе к поселку Лесной.
It's said that during the Chernobyl explosion, it looked very similar to that large glow. So as you can see there, quite a large blaze there coming out of Makivka. But that is it for everything happening inside of the country of Ukraine. Don't worry, there's plenty of other stuff that has to deal with Ukraine too as we get ready to move into the international news. And the first thing we actually come over here is into the Nizhny Novgorod region, which is where yet another mysterious fire has taken place. Now, we don't usually report on Russian mysterious fires. There are a ton of them, so it's kind of hard to really get supplement. We'd be talking about 10, 20 fires a night if that was the case. But a trend is starting to take place. And so this is yet another mysterious major fire that's taken place at a major key energy facility inside of Russia. This time, the fire was located at the major Russian oil company, Lukoil, which is here in the Nizhny Novgorod Oblast here. One of 4 of the largest refineries which the company currently owns and operates. No information has currently been there or has been released regarding what the cause of the blaze is or any subsequent casualties. We just know that it's happened. And you see there the pretty major blaze taking place. Another video a little bit closer here from what appears to be a worker. And with that, we immediately jump out of here. Jump out of Russia and immediately jump over to Germany, where the newest aid package has been announced. Germany announced on Wednesday a new aid package for Ukraine that includes 2 self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, aka the Gepard, as well as 5 border protection vehicles and 6 mobile antenna mast systems. Coming from the official German federal government. And that will also include 6,000 rounds of ammunition, which won't take the Gepard very long to go through. But as we jump over here to Portugal, we can see Portugal was also sending is also going to be sending 3 Leopard 2 tanks. They currently are planning on sending the Leopard 2 A6 model. They have 3 of them, and it's estimated once again that delivery time frame to be coming in March. Going from the National Defense of Portugal, and this is apparently something they were coordinating with allies. We're going to go a little bit out of order here because it's actually going to make more chronological sense if we do so. We jump up here into the United Kingdom, where NATO training of Ukrainian troops does continue. Ukrainian troops continue to train in the United Kingdom and elsewhere throughout Europe as part of an ongoing effort of allies to bring Ukraine out of the Soviet era and into the modern-day battlefield, increasing Ukrainian efficiency and therefore their lethality and survivability on the grueling battlefields of Ukraine. That, by the way, is some of the best training you can do. When you have actors and they speak the language and everything else, and you have an Op 4 that you're up against, and people are having like realistic wounds and stuff that they're doing simulated wounds and stuff. You have artillery simulators. You have blanks, and somebody's fake shooting at you and all that stuff. That is some of the best training I have ever done in the entirety of my Marine Corps career. and it is some of the best training I think anyone can do, because it really puts you into that mindset, especially when you're trying to do platoon and company level and battalion and regimental level attacks. But also, all those things only happen if you understand the basic fundamentals of each of their parts. And that includes, of course, TCCC, Tactical Combat Casualty Care. And that is some of the basics that are required for people here to learn. And it's very much a necessity for everyone to learn it, to take care of the wounded, whether that is, providing self-aid, aid to yourself, or if that's providing buddy aid, and then later on if they train to become corpsmen or medic aid, which is what you can see here. Some good photos coming out here. Of course, applying the CAT tourniquets, or combat application tourniquet. Always good to keep some. And that looks like that poor unfortunate fellow is getting what I can only describe as probably an NPA, which I am so sorry, friends. The NPA is a little rubber tube, little rubber phalange tube, that if someone is unconscious, you automatically do it. But if the airway is obstructed, for instance, they have a lot of burns or something that they could have had from the inside, that causes their esophagus to swell, you put what's called an NPA, and it goes through the nose and then down into the mouth and into the back of the throat. As long as there isn't as long as they haven't like swallowed their teeth or something that blocks the airway lower, that will bypass the airway and allows them to continue breathing. It's something you automatically do if they're unconscious, just because you can't check to see if something is getting worse for them by checking their state, like asking them questions and talking to them. It's not something you can easily observe. So, yeah, very uncomfortable, horrendously uncomfortable. Guaranteed for me to cause nosebleeds, because my nose just isn't, it can't take the pain and suffering that the rest of me can, apparently. Of course, those tourniquets. The tourniquet is probably one of the single most important pieces of gear to ever keep. And if you can, getting CAT tourniquets is, you should just have them. They're just good to have, because I keep CAT tourniquets in my vehicle. I always, in my kit myself, I keep 4 of them, one for each part of my body, both of my legs, both of my arms, because it will literally save your life or save someone else's life if you apply it properly. It is immensely important to know how to use a tourniquet and to have one. Always keep your tourniquet if you have the ability to. And if you're going into one of these situations, definitely always have one. Have more than you need. Of course, the Challenger crews that are working on the tanks, sometimes he puts them on for fun, coming from Tim Epps. No, I did it to show here on the channel one time. I did tourniquet myself here on the channel one time. It was not very good. Well, it was good. I couldn't get my fingers in between it and but it was very painful, and it was not an enjoyable experience. But it is educational, so I guess that's important. You see here, this is actually some of the tank crews that are training on the Challenger. And that actually kind of leads us into our next point a little bit early there. A very important aspect that everyone trains on, including the United States, of course, but of course as they're training them here, because this will be very much a very well-needed thing. And that is to clear a trench properly. There's no real good way to clear a trench, but there is better ways than others. And that's what we're seeing here. The Ukrainians learning how to clear trenches and use and assault trenches properly. What this is going to be doing is establishing a base of fire to keep the enemy suppressed. You would normally want to do this with a machine gun. This is why there's different rates of fire with a machine gun. The sustained rate, the rapid rate, and the cyclic rate of fire. Usually, if you're just providing a support by fire, or an SBF is what it's called, you're going to operate in the, you're going to be what's called talking guns, a couple of machine guns that are going back and forth. Heap suppression, that allows troops, that base of fire, that suppression, allows for other infantry, while the enemy has their heads down and can't look or shoot back really, to maneuver and move on to their position, get into the trench, and actually close with and kill them. And that is the whole point, is to getting that base of fire, so that way, once these guys have the enemy suppressed, these guys can... Oh, actually, that next photo. This guy can now maneuver while his buddies are suppressing here in the background and suppressing that trench, so they can't poke their heads up and shoot at this guy. And now he's going to jump in here with the rest of his team, and he's going to start clearing out that trench, and he's going to be pieing off his corners, and then they're going to be... They think there might be a booby trap or an IED or a mine, something. Throw the hook down there. Why would you walk onto it when you can throw a hook and just drag it towards you? But as you could just see, President Zelensky ended up arriving in the United Kingdom this morning, and he had a very big day. He took a little tour of Europe almost today. This is his second journey outside of Ukraine since the beginning of the war last year. And in the United Kingdom, he met with King Charles III at Buckingham Palace. He addressed Parliament in the House of Commons and met the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, at 10 Downing Street. Of course, they went to the training grounds as well.
Great pleasure to welcome my friend President Zelensky to the UK. We've had a good chat already. We've got lots to discuss over the course of this day about how we can continue to support Ukraine in their struggle against Russia. It's a privilege to have you here, Vladimir, and we want to stand by you throughout this conflict and ensure that you're victorious.
Thank you so much, Richard, for inviting me, and for me, great honor to be here in Britain. And thanks, Britain, for society. First of all, for your big support from the first days of full-scale invasion. Thank you so much. We are proud, really, and we have very good relations with Rishi, and will prolong our dialogue, which will, I think, very important for security of our country, and of course, security for the world.
So, of course, a nice visit there. And they went and they did quite a few things. You can see here. Meaning His Majesty the King. Tim skipping ahead of me here. Of course, a lot of talks. They went up inside of aircraft and all sorts of stuff. By the way, you can't look at this and not say that something is not going to happen. This photo. Think about what Ukraine has been talking about for a very long time now, and then you have this photo. Are you kidding me? Come on. Of course, going and meeting the Challenger 2 crews there that are training in the United Kingdom. And as Tim Epps already jumped to, even gave a journalist a hug.
BBC Ukraine.
This is a journalist from BBC Ukraine who's who's there in the United Kingdom and is now getting ready to ask this question.
Вітаю, пане президенте. Дякую за ваш приїзд. Я б вас хотіла обійняти і подякувати, але не можна.
Чому?
Але
Ви йдіть обійміть.
не застрелять.
On BBC Ukraine.
In a world of Putin's be as Zelensky. And coming from Bloomberg. Oh. Which, that tweet was apparently deleted, so I apologize. But there's, you know, a lot of stuff obviously happening, and he gave a helmet to the UK Parliament. And it was a helmet from one of his fighter pilot, from one of the aces in the Ukrainian Air Force. And it was a message from the fighter squadron who had all signed it. And it was basically saying, we have freedom, give us the wings to protect it. So there's some push, and Rishi Sunak said that there were no taboos. Everything was on the table. So we're getting that similar kind of sense from a lot of the other allies as they're going through talking here. From Rishi Sunak, everything is on the table. So what they're really pushing for, what the Ukrainians are pushing for, are for aircraft, modern NATO aircraft now. They're getting the tanks that they need. Okay, we got the ground stuff figured out, but wars are won based off of aerial superiority, and neither side has it. So I need aircraft now to support these ground forces. But after spending all day there in the United Kingdom, what did he do? He got right onto another aircraft and he flew to Paris, France, because he had another high-level meeting to meet. This is his second leg of his tour of Europe so far, where he had face-to-face conversations with each of the leaders, both President Macron and Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who actually traveled in from Germany to also be at this meeting. And so you can see here, this is the British aircraft that has flown him into Germany here, or into Paris, France here. This is the arrival of President Zelensky. And of course, this is all coming from French news agencies, so I apologize. They have all the good filming.
Allemand arrive dans les cours de l'Élysée, accueilli par Emmanuel Macron.
Et de le recevoir ensemble. Parce que je rappelais tout à l'heure ce voyage de Kiev qui avait été fait par...
Mais ils étaient déjà ensemble.
Voilà, et donc là aussi c'était très important de montrer l'unité.
So you see Olaf Scholz arriving there. Obviously a very warm welcome between these two. Macron was one of the first people that spoke to President Zelensky on the 24th. He's one of the very first world leaders to speak to President Zelensky. They have a very close relationship as world leaders. Have always had a very close relationship as world leaders. And France, I think, kind of doesn't give off the same kind of... doesn't seem like they're doing as much, but from what it seems is France gives a lot of pressure behind closed doors more than they can publicly. It seems to be kind of their method to their madness, and it seems to be rather successful.
Voilà Volodymyr Zelensky qui s'avance pour cette poignée de main entre deux hommes qui se sont vus aussi du côté de Kiev.
Oui, il y a un...
And of course, they have that press conferences and everything else. You always got to shake hands and kiss babies, that kind of thing. I mean, he still has to be a politician. Looks like they switched spots. Tim Ep says, pretty sure the French Foreign Legion has been in Ukraine since 2014. I don't know. I know I had friends that I went to like my MOS school and stuff with that went to Ukraine prior to the war, that trained Ukrainians, and had a lot of friends, and unfortunately also know a lot of people that have also been killed as a result of the war in Ukraine, because they made friends. They went over there and trained the Ukrainians how to use the Javelin, being anti-tank missile men. So I had friends that went and did that before this war. It was just one of the another European rotations that if you, I was one of the few units that was still doing Middle East deployments and doing combat deployments. Everyone else is doing UDPs and MUs and stuff. So they're going out and they're training and they're doing, international things like that. They're not doing, stuff like that. So I'm sure the Foreign Legion was also in there. It could have just been standard French forces too. I mean, the whole NATO alliance has been training NATO, or has been, providing Ukraine with the support since the beginning of this whole situation, which you can't look, the war itself starting on February the 24th is certainly a thing, right? Like, it's certainly a big turning point, but this situation's been ongoing since 2014. I mean, Russia invades Crimea. So you can't look at it and say, well, no, it's been ongoing for 10 years now. So I certainly can believe that that there has been troops that are there and have been training. France has problems with Putin and Wagner and Mali too. That is correct. And we do have actual video footage of that too that we have aired here on the channel. But that leads us down here and into northern Syria and southern Turkey, where here at the northern border of Syria, 300 bodies have so far been returned, yet no aid has arrived. The Syrian government announced that all aids are going into the country, regardless of its destination, must enter through Damascus. The humanitarian organizations couldn't be sure whether this aid could actually go to northern Syria, hard hit by the earthquake, yet is being held by rebels should they send aid through Damascus. The only other route whether aid could enter northern Syria is from the Syrian-Turkish border of Bab al-Hawa from Turkey. This road is reportedly damaged due to the earthquake, but has since become accessible. 300 plus Syrians who died have been repatriated through this route by Wednesday. However, according to the Bab al-Hawa spokesperson, no aid has yet to arrive. The death toll from the earthquake in northern Syria has risen to 1,730 so far, which is expected to continue to rise. The White Helmet Volunteers, also known as the Syria Civil Defense, are currently reporting severe shortages of equipment and supplies. The search efforts were compounded by snowfall and freezing temperatures overnight. The night search is still currently ongoing. Coming from the White Helmets themselves. Very famous and very experienced group that have been providing, first aid response since the beginning of the war 12 years ago, and have been specifically targeted. This group of individuals has been specifically targeted by Russian forces and by the Assad forces. So when we talk about double taps, this is who they were meant to hit, because Syria and Russia have labeled the White Helmets as a terrorist organization. By the way, you can donate to the White Helmets in the description below. It's one of the links for for the efforts, for the recovery efforts that we've actually provided. And I personally vouch for the white helmets. Amazing group of individuals, amazingly experienced. They've done a lot of great things. We honestly couldn't have done as much good as we did without them. Very amazing group. They have saved a lot of civilians. They're able to stabilize civilians enough to get them moved and brought to us for higher echelon of care, for us to be able to triage and provide that medical care that they simply just don't have the facilities or the equipment to do there at the time. But they were able to, with what little they had, be able to save hundreds, if not upon thousands of people. It's been very amazing. And when the war in Ukraine first started, they made videos of lessons they had learned the hard way through the entire duration of the war and sent them to the Ukrainian first responders, to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, to show them this is what you need to do, this is how you need to search, this is how you recover, people in the rubble. And it has saved thousands of lives inside of Ukraine too.
Body bag after body bag coming in from Turkey to Syria. The only thing that has come through this border crossing are dead bodies. SubhanAllah. Allah, where are the brothers and sisters around the world? Yeah, where are all the crocodile tears? People are literally under the rubble right now as I'm sending you this message, and the only support, the only thing we receive are dead bodies. Wallahi, the Syrian people have exhausted almost 3 days digging through rubble. Some people with their bare hands, yeah, because there's not enough trucks, not enough resources, yeah, but their loved ones are under 4 or 5 story buildings and they're non-stop just digging through it to try and save their lives, yeah. They need assistance, they need support. This isn't a matter of policies, of politics, yeah, it's a matter of humanity, yeah, and we need everyone to get that act together.
No crap. Couldn't have said it better myself. And while we're sitting here and talking about Syria, combined, the dead have reached the total and surged over 450% since the initial reports to over 11,000 people, which have been killed by the earthquakes inside of southern Turkey and northern Syria. That number is expected to climb rapidly. Some estimates have put it conservatively at 20,000. And that, once again, we will see over the next few days. Tens of thousands of more are injured. The situation continues to worsen. There's been fresh snowfall and freezing temperatures. 648 so far recorded aftershocks, which is making search and rescue difficult and recovery difficult. And at this point, we're even hearing of first responders being killed because of further collapses of buildings. And humanitarian aid is pouring in from countries around the world, especially into Turkey, while Syria still remains to be less attended to. But, however, the rescue workers and humanitarian groups themselves are being deeply affected, causing coordination issues. The UN World Food Program, or WFP, one of their key coordinators named Levent, he was killed during the earthquake. However, efforts to continue with the WFP and the UN putting emphasis on Syria, as much of the world is currently focused on Turkey. That is coming from David Beasley, who is the head of the UN World Food Program, regarding the loss of Levent. He's one of their logistical coordinators. This is currently underway. They're currently planning on reaching over 500,000 people. And they're giving off some statistics here. Very important ones. So the earthquake has hit a place where 90% of the people already rely on humanitarian assistance. They have enough food inside northwest Syria for 125,000 people and is providing this to local partners at this point. They have launched the emergency response to support 500,000 people, but require $46 million USD to meet the needs. This is them offloading food rations there in Hama. You can see that search and rescue. Please be sure to check out the video description and check out all the organizations that are down there. So there are a lot, and we vetted 6 very rapidly to provide immediate aid to this group, or to these people, as well as, you know, whenever something else pops up throughout the world, we try and get those out too. And if you have more, please send them to us. We really want to help out. And a lot of countries are going to Turkey for aid, but once again, northern Syria isn't getting really anything. So please be sure to check out the locations. A lot of those that we went through and we vetted, expecting for this to happen, a lot of those that we went through and vetted specifically are inside of this area of Syria already, and have been for some time, and we know that they are providing first immediate aid and response inside of Syria, which is why I went through and chose them. I was specifically looking for, because Syria I knew wasn't going to get nearly as much. And those people have been through so much already. Come over here. We're in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, here in Pakistan. The Special Force Services ended up eliminating 12 militants of the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. This clash occurred the day before in the districts of Lucky Marwat, and the security forces decided to leave a suspicious pickup truck to check them for documents. The terrorists opened fire from the vehicle and tried to escape. With return fire, the military destroyed the militants. At the scene of the shootout, the security forces seized weapons, communications equipment, IEDs, and Afghan currency, which led special services to the idea that the terrorists had recently arrived from Afghanistan. According to law enforcement agencies, the liquidated were involved in an attack on police officers in December of 2022. You can see here a lot of what was captured. Let's jump down here and into Africa. Start off here in Zambia, where vigilance state has been declared due to a cholera outbreak. The Ministry of Health in Zambia declared a cholera outbreak on January the 26th in the Mwa Sambambwe district. 7 cases were confirmed and no related deaths were reported. And the Vubwe district, 42 cases, including one death, have been reported since January 26. 23,500 doses of oral cholera vaccines were distributed to healthcare facilities in Vupui district. And there is a press release coming from the government there in Zambia. Meanwhile, North Kivu, here in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, there was an attack on a UN convoy. Demonstrators in the Democratic Republic of the Congo attacked a UN convoy operating under the UNESCO operation. As a result of the clash, 3 civilians were killed, while 32 peacekeepers and 6 truck drivers were injured. The United Nations and the DRC government have established a joint investigation into the incident. Coming from the official UN peacekeeping. For the announcement of the attack on the convoy. And also, this is the official statement from the UNESCO mission stating that they will be conducting a joint investigation. Meanwhile, in the country of Nigeria, there are over 100 people who have been killed so far in Bakori, Nigeria. Fighting between Islamic extremists here in this region and a local militant group called the ZELENSKY led to over 100 people being killed. The vast majority of those killed are so far civilians. We do have a video, however, it is too graphic to show here on stream, and that is of the casualty collection point there in Bakori. Jumping over here and into the into North America, across the Atlantic, we see that 2 people were unfortunately killed in a bus crash, which ended up in a daycare. A bus rammed into the ground floor of a child daycare in Laval, Quebec, on earlier this morning, shattering the walls and collapsing the roof. 2 4-year-old children died, and 6 other children were seriously injured. One child, who would have turned 5 in just 10 days. The 51-year-old driver was apprehended by bystanders at the scene and has been sent to the hospital. The driver is charged with first-degree murder. The motive is still being investigated. The CN Tower will dim for 5 minutes at the top of each hour in honor of the victims of the Laval bus crash. And to finish off the night, we do have yet another story of children, but in a little bit more of an uplifting story. In Denver, Colorado, a rehabilitation program for Ukrainian children is currently underway. A 2-week-long rest and rehabilitation program for children of the Ukrainian National Guard servicemen who have been injured or lost their lives during the war in Ukraine is currently underway there in Denver, Colorado, according to the Ministry of Internal Affairs. It's currently ongoing there at McAuliffe International School. But that is the news for tonight. Obviously a lot of, unfortunately, very depressing topics, but that is the reality of kind of the news that comes out. Is unfortunately a lot of bad things, but luckily you can put a little bit of good back into it. And that's because if you check out the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different organizational links down there, all of which 70% or more of the donations that they receive go directly to their programs and go directly to helping people, while 30% or less go to things like salaries and administration costs and things that make NGOs kind of controversial in some ways. If you have more organizations, please get in touch with the staff member either through the Discord or via one of our official emails on our website, so that way we can be able to begin the vetting process and add more. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. Please be sure to check out, please be sure to give us that like and subscribe and help us grow this channel and grow this project. We're never doing super chats. We're never pushing any kind of merchandising. We're never going to be monetizing this for personal gain. 100% of everything that we do here on this channel is always has been and always will be for charity. So please be sure to help us support and grow this project so we can do even more good and have even more of an impact throughout the world. And so in the meantime, I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. Well, I hope that you'll be back and joining us once again on Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central, for yet another 48 hours of news and review. My name is Paul with the New News, and have a fantastic night and a fantastic rest of your week, everybody. Bye now.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять доволноваги, і чудно кличі, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлепуйло. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять доволноваги, і чудно кличі, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 тысяч лет. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять доволноваги, і чудно кличі, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your top 11, shove it up your wrinkled bum. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять доволноваги, і чудно кличі, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріля доволноваги, і чудно кличі, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять доволноваги, і чудно кличі, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять доволноваги, і чудно кличі, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. нахуй!